welcome here. Margarita, welcome to Light Channel in Denmark.
Thank you so much for welcoming here.
Yeah, it's very interesting to have you here, and thank you to your friend, actually, that brought you here and made this possible. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit and tell me a little bit who you are, tell our viewers?
I'm Margarita. Originally, I'm from Lithuania. I live in the capital of Lithuania, Vilnius. And I was born into the Adventist family, and also have a friends who are Adventists, and we're living in Copenhagen here. And we recently have a couple of mission trips to Ukraine, mainly to the capital of Kiev, where we have been distributing the literature.
Yeah.
Mainly about the Reformation and about E.G. White's book, Great Controversy.
All right, so this is one of the churches you told me before. This is one of the churches you went to?
Yes, our idea was to go to speak to the people on the streets. Yeah, we did that, but also we wanted to go and to inside the churches. So we went to one Lutheran church, is the German Lutheran church, one of the first churches, which was built a few hundred years ago.
Yeah.
And we were talking to people. It was after their mass, after their gathering, but some people were already sitting there waiting for another meeting. And we handed out a few books and brochures, and we had some leaflets about the beast. They were really interested in that. And one person, he's the third generation of German, and he said, yes, I saw somewhere, I know who Elena White is. And I know that book, Great Controversy. And he was so happy. We were talking about 30 minutes. And he also asked us for the second copy to give his sister. So he was very positive about the Adventist, and we were also surprised that he knew about Elena White and her writings.
Okay, that's very interesting. If we could go back a little bit, I understand that you were actually born in, what is it called, the Soviet Russia,
I was born in Soviet Union. This is, and of course, as you know, in Soviet Union there was no religion.
Yeah.
It means atheism. And one of the things that it was forbidden for people to read the Bible. Even at that time, you will not be able to find the Bible in a bookshop or somewhere in the library. And in a black market, the Bible cost was about monthly salary.
Wow.
So if generally a general person was earning 80 to 100 rubles, so he had to pay 100 rubles for that.
For one Bible.
For one copy.
Yeah.
After some time, the price in the black market dropped. You would have to pay only half of your salary. And of course, the question is where people were getting Bibles from, mainly from a salesman. They were earning in such way. Of course, you should know a contact person whom should you talk and approach in order to get this Bible. It was not so simple to get to the ship and say, I would like to get a Bible. You should know a mediator.
Wow. Well, I guess you probably know a little bit and quite a lot about the communist ideology. Communist ideology, which was very much against religion, any kind of religion, not just Christianity, right? And it is being said within communism that religion or Christianity is opium for the people. So they were doing everything possible, not just in the Soviet Russia, but that's mainly a communist ideology to compete or to destroy everything that has to do with the religion. And you were born into that environment, as I understand, and I understand also that your parents, your mother had some issues, had problems raising you up as Christian. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Actually, when I was born, maybe the situation became milder, not so strong and strict. But for example, for my brother, who was a little bit older, older parents, they had to pay the fines. It means for every Sabbath, we had to pay 25 rubles if he was not attending the school, because already he was the first grade student in the secondary school.
Yeah.
And for example, at that time the salary was 100 rubles, so you have to pay the whole salary if there are 4 Sabbaths in a month. If there are 5 Sabbaths, you have more. So this is, I think, money is not such a problem. But before, I think before Gorbachev's like ruling period, during the period of Stalin, maybe a little bit later, people from Adventists, we were being taken, detained. Of course, one of the reasons, one of the arguments, what the government is saying that they're being mistreated. It means on Saturdays we couldn't attend the school. This is because Seventh-day Adventists celebrate Saturday. And as you do not provide a very good education, you bring your child just from Monday until Friday. It means even on Saturday the child does not attend. Your child will be taken away and put into the orphanage.
So that was a targeting especially for Seventh-day Adventists or Christian in general? So
maybe Christian in general, but other Christians, as I know in Soviet Union, there were no other Christians who were celebrating Saturday at that time. Of course, there was Baptists maybe having some issues, but maybe it's not so strict. They could go to work from Monday till Saturday. They could study from Monday to Saturday, and it's not an issue. Maybe there were some Sabbath keepers about which I'm not aware, but majority were Adventists.
All right. So you experienced that from your very early years when you started to go to primary school, and you were with your parents as a whole family and trying to keep your faith, you know, to have your Christianity and to go to church. And you knew that, or your parents knew that that was against the Soviet Union law at that point in time. And you mentioned that they were fining every family or per child, right? They were fining the family 25, you said 25 rubles per day if you were not attending school. So how did your parents manage to survive? Because I guess probably some people they gave in, right? This is a very difficult situation to be placed in.
I know that the situation didn't last long. When I started going to school, I started to attend like a test school where there was only 5 working days, studying days from Monday until Friday. And just it was the 1 year before the collapse of the Soviet Union. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was no any problem to celebrate the Sabbath. But I know what my mom did. She went to Moscow to the committee which was responsible for the children's rights, and she wrote a couple of applications. And from my perspective, we also have to use like the laws or the guns of the state to prove, because in the laws it was written that the parents can raise the children according to their faith. It was everything. It was officially written in the documents, and that there is the freedom of faith.
Even in the Soviet
in the Soviet Union.
Okay.
And for example, when the representatives of Russia were participating in the Human Rights Committee, for example, Helsinki Human Rights Committee, and also in, as I remember, in Spain or in Portugal at the end of 1980s, they were surprised, Western representatives, how it can be. For example, if the law says that there is freedom, and they also receive some messages from Adventists and Baptists and other denominations that their freedom is a little bit neglected. And it was misconfusion among these two.
But how did your parents, one thing it was surviving through faith, I guess, and I suppose, and through a lot of prayers, and I'm sure you were not the only family there, but in your understanding and your parents, why do you believe, if you look back on those years, if you probably had this conversation with your parents, why do you think they are so much targeting the Christians, and that was kind of seen like a threat to society, right? Why do you think the system did it, because this is an ideology. This is not just some bad people, some bad individual, right, coming after you because they didn't like you or they were racist whatsoever. This was not about ethnical cleansing. This was an ideology. This was a system that was targeting Christianity, right, as a lifestyle. So
the biggest persecution, I think, when you speak about persecution against the Protestants, were in Lithuania. Because if you take a look back, Lithuania was a Catholic country for a very long time. Other countries, Baltic countries, are Protestant countries. If you take a look at the Central Asia, they were Muslims, but I think they were not so strong Muslims, and in the Middle East, they just, somebody brought their religion. And if you speak about Lithuanians, even they were inside the heart, they were Catholics, but like on the documents or somewhere we had to be atheists. So this is in a person who is working in the religious rights or issues offices. Outside, I think he was like an atheist, but inside he was a Catholic. And it was, if you take a look at the Middle Ages, what Catholics have done and how they have been persecuting people, this is such mentality still left. Lithuania was independent between the First and Second World War, and at that time, of course, Catholic religion, they have thrived. And can you imagine, just immediately over the night, he says, now you have to be atheist. Of course, even for Catholics, it was forbidden to celebrate Christmas, Easter, as we were celebrating. So we were celebrating it silently, somewhere inside the house, in a basement. And this is the understanding what kind of person was in that position.
Yeah, so religious freedom was just on the paper. That's what you're saying. But in reality, that wasn't religious freedom. And they were targeting almost everybody, every single religious community and Christian community, even the Catholics, as you said. Were your family Seventh Adventists from the beginning, or they converted?
My grandmother from mother's side, she started learning Bible herself. She bought for her monthly salary the Bible in Russian language, because it was difficult to find the Lithuanian language. Mainly in Catholic churches you could get it, but I think they didn't get many copies. So she was Lithuanian. She started learning Russian language and the same studying Bible. But how she came to it, I think at first she went to the priest before learning about the Bible. She wanted to buy a mass, but she didn't have enough money, and the priest said, no, I cannot organize a mass because you don't have money. And she says, it's nonsense. She started thinking that I can have a relationship with the God, and I think the Holy Spirit worked and encouraged her to look at the Bible.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. But I suppose that you have learned the history of Russia as a whole, and not just the Soviet Union, because, and when I'm thinking, the ideology, the communist ideology came, of course, when Stalin came into power during the First World War and a little bit later. So that was not, the communist ideology was not part of Russia, right? And Russia, before Soviet Russia, was a Protestant country, as I know from history, correct? So how did it, what about like the normal person on the street?
I think Russia before Russian Empire was more Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, and maybe a little bit Protestants were coming missionaries. And maybe I think Catholicism and Russian Orthodox are very quite similar.
Yeah.
If you just deep, apart from exterior, maybe some elements, and there was not a big. They are like sisters and brothers or cousins. I can tell you, and one of the reasons that people maybe didn't get deeper into a Bible, into the essence. This is one of the problem, and for them maybe the ceremonies was most important than the Bible itself. Of course, there were many groups, even in the Soviet Empire, where were people who were celebrating Sabbath.
All right.
Sabbatarians, we were called. And even some famous writers, we were Sabbatarians, and but it was not a big movement, just didn't affect the country.
Well, how did your parents manage to kind of survive? Because the system was quite threatening. So one thing is that they threaten you, and did they have to pay any fines?
Yes, they did, just for my, like I mentioned before, for my brother who did not attend the school on Sabbath, but for me they did not have. But one of the things, we were writing some applications to different institutions, and I think it might be that these institutions were tired of their constant writing applications, because they had to review and answer it again. So maybe it was one of the reasons why they survived.
I guess this was I suppose it was very tough, not just for you, but you're not that well at that point, but for your parents. And I also suppose that you know your parents very well. Why do you believe today, why did they do that? Because the consequences were very tough. And the reason I'm asking, because I think, and I believe your testimony, your story, could be an example. You know, as you probably know, a lot of, people here, let's say Seventh-day Adventists or Christian in general here in the West, they take it as a easy come, easy go kind of religion, and they tend to forget, we tend to forget that how difficult it still is for many people, and also for you and your family during that time. So back to my question, why do you think they actually had this strong feeling that they had to follow their own conscience and defy the law of the state?
I think they were the people, for them it was the fairness was very important, and maybe themselves, they come from a family, they were taught the principles are principles, and you cannot betray anybody. It's the God's word, or to betray any person, and maybe such kind of understanding that 10 God's commandment is important in their life, not just commandment number 4, or all commandments are important, and they said they will have to follow. Maybe another thing, they were reading the Bible a lot. They were reading the writings of Ellen White, and so examples there of different people, of different guides. You know, like Luther, Zwingli, and other people who were even dying. So for them, it looks like that we are not planning to die. We are not going to die. And if you have a faith, and also have a faith in God, He will help you. Maybe another thing, my granddad from my father's side, he died in a prison because he was also a missionary. When my dad was small, maybe 7, 8 years old, his dad was taken away. He has never seen afterwards. Maybe it was also for him an example, a big mark in his life, that he also wanted to be as his dad.
All right. So the faith of your parents, especially you mentioned your dad, was so strong. So he was actually willing to go to prison, and taking the risk that your grandfather actually too, because you never saw him again, or your father never saw him again. So the risk was there. Actually, this was kind of a life and death situation, right? To still keep your faith and put actually God's law higher than the law of the state, because this is a situation that, you know, we're living at the very end of the end time, and in my personal belief, I believe that we are reaching again to the same situation. So maybe again your testimony, at least your family testimony, could help us and all our viewers to see that this is actually a real life situation that you and your parents went through, right? And I find it very, not just interesting, but kind of rewarding as well to see that your grandfather was willing to risk his life. And did anybody know where they were taking him? He was just deported?
He spent, as you know, 5 years in a prison, not far from Moscow. And this is what we know, because Dad, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, went to the archives, to the library, and found this document. And nothing more we are not aware about. I think when you have an example in your life, family, neighbors, surrounding example, it's easier for you to continue the same job, as you know how to behave, and even maybe you don't have any questions that you will behave differently. I think any positive or negative example has impact.
So your granddad had a huge impact on you as well, right? The example that he actually left in the family, and also for your father, that he was willing to risk his life and go to prison, and finally, how old was your grandfather when you suppose he died after 5 years?
I don't know, maybe 50, maybe 48.
50, okay.
Maybe 48.
Okay. Yeah, so that wasn't an old age.
No, at that time, no, I think so. And for example, I have a few acquaintances or some friends who say that it's impossible even nowadays to celebrate Sabbath or Saturday because the work is number one. How should I lose a very good paid work if it's on Saturdays? On Saturdays, for example, I have double payment. But again, it's the question of your faith. If you trust the God, and the God will give you better maybe conditions, better work, and He knows what's better for you.
So I suppose your friends or your family, maybe at that point in time, they thought you were crazy, right? Why would you do it? Why would you risk your life for...
Sometimes they think that I'm crazy and strange, mainly from the point of Sabbath. Other questions, they don't think that I'm so crazy. Why would risky? I think for me, God's commandments, it's like same thing. How can you betray the God? God did not betray you.
So your faith in God is so too strong to actually betray God. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
I think the most important is to have a faith. Of course, you will have difficulties, but you will manage to carry these difficulties and this burden. The God will not give you more if He will see that you are not able to do that.
Yeah. Your parents are still...
No, my dad has passed away.
And how old was he?
He was 60. 60
years old, okay. But if you look back at that life, and as you just mentioned in a few words, do you believe that has actually been not just a trial with a lot of danger, but has been a very good test for you and your family? And if you look also at the whole ideology of communism on people's life, it hasn't just been a huge jail where everybody has to stay there and you just have to obey the state, otherwise you're going to be deported to Siberia or some other place. And I'm thinking to compare that to let's say West life. Because a lot of people, they have, in my view, their life is so easy. And I'm saying with that it's much easier to lose your faith in the West than is to lose it in that kind of environment. Would you recognize this, or?
Yeah, I can just compare with the sport. When you have, for example, if you're jogging, preparing for a marathon, and you're doing it every second day and running 10, 15, 20 kilometers, then you are prepared. You're constantly in a very good condition.
Yeah.
You are fit, and the day of marathon comes, you can do it easily. Of course, there will be some difficulties, but this is the same with your faith. If you have some difficult situations, maybe difficult conversations with somebody at first God sent, that you have to think what's important in your life, where God starts to prepare you. It shouldn't be like very dangerous situation, but some difficult and challenging.
Yeah.
Then I think you are being prepared.
So that was your test, your family test, your trial.
Test.
Okay.
And also forgot to mention that my mother's sister, she has twin sisters. One also spent in prison. She was detained when she was 26 or 27 years old, and she stayed 3.5 years in a prison. One of the things, she was in St. Petersburg, and she was handing out leaflets. And also putting into the post boxes. And of course, the intelligence service was following, observing, and took her. And it was difficult for her, but now she lives in the US. She says that it was the best time for her, and she had learned so many things and so positive things being in prison, and she understands now like a blessing after 30 years.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful actually to look back at this experience that you had in your aunt? There was your aunt you were explaining she had in prison, and actually you can reach to that point where she's thanking God for that experience, because I suppose that helped her to increase even more her faith, and I suppose she had an experience with God in prison. I'm assuming that it's not really easy. I'm assuming also was she tortured or somehow, or she was just
maybe she was not so tortured. Maybe just interviewed like 12
like
hours,
KGB style, or
maybe something similar. But as I understand from her conversation with her, she was very respected because she was like in a cell with murderers and other people who were maybe stealing something, were stealing. And she had quite different article in her documents, and she was like not like a star, but very respected by all prisoners.
So kind of like the saint among all sinners.
Maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that was very difficult, but maybe God had a purpose to place her in that place.
You never know, but she also was speaking with she was in Wien prison, quite strict prison, and I think she was speaking a lot with other prisoners and speaking also to the employees, how much it was, of course, allowed at the time. And she says maybe she was a missionary there. You don't know.
Yeah. So that was her mission to be there in the prison. Well, she's not the only one. I know a lot of other people that has God allowed them to went into that particular situation to maybe to just minister for one single person or even the whole jail. If you kind of transpond all that situation and the atmosphere back in the Soviet Union till today, I'm assuming that you would say, oh yes, today we have religious freedom, right?
Oh yes, you will not be taken to the court or to the jail. Nobody will persecute you. And nobody would say you have to stop talking. But maybe now, after 30 years of collapse of the Soviet Union, people have seen many missionaries, and maybe some of them, they were not so fair people, and they have lots of information for that, and maybe they are tired. This is one of the, I think, minus of being the freedom. Yeah,
so now you have all the freedom, you have access to information, you can travel, you have Bibles, you can get them at a very low price, maybe even for free. I guess some missionaries, they even give books for free, like you do it here. I know also from Denmark, they coming to Lithuania or to Ukraine to give books. But so I suppose now that a lot of people now are coming to Christianity, right?
I think maybe new religions, like Eastern religions, are also taking and occupying Eastern, I think, in Western Europe and maybe around the world. And people now are looking for something for deeper, more interesting, more attractive. Of course, maybe a little bit sophisticated. And another maybe aspect would be there are too many information, and for a person who does not know where to start looking for, he can be lost.
So how is Lithuania today in your view? Is it more like a secular country, or do you still see Christianity or the Orthodox religion or the Catholic religion, or is still within the tradition or society?
Officially it's a secular country, and even in practice, majority of people are Catholics, about 87%. They declare that they're Catholics, and they go twice a year during Christmas and Easter to the church, or sometimes just for special maybe birthday or wedding events. And I think it's like artificial Christianity, I would call it. People just go to the church and they forget what we were doing there. And in real life, they are not following even some God's commandments. They're even forgetting that these commandments exist. I think it's more secular, secular world.
And you're actually continuing, as you mentioned in the beginning here, you're continuing this work, missionary work, and you've expanded your work to Ukraine. Why Ukraine? Because of the language, or?
One of the things that I met one missionary from Denmark, and our idea was to distribute Lena's white book, Great Controversy, in Russian language. And we have lots of books in Russian at that time we had, and our idea was to go to Ukraine, where majority of people speak Russian. And the first time we went in December, we managed to distribute the one booklet about 500 years of anniversary after the Luther.
Yeah.
And this book and a couple of other leaflets, and it was so successful, and we thought that people would like to learn more and to get more, and we decided to go again in March.
This is the one, right?
Yes, this is the pamphlet about.
We know that very well, yeah. We've been spreading this around quite a few countries, yeah.
And it was, we had many interesting stories. We were sharing the gospel near the entrance to the metro, and one young gentleman came. He said, "Oh, you are maybe Seventh-day Adventist. My grandmother was Seventh-day Adventist 25 years ago. She was telling me about it. Can we have a book, Great Controversy? Because somebody said that's a very interesting book." And such kind of different conversations we had, maybe 10 or 20, and people who were very happy that they have received such books, and they said they will be reading, and maybe.
So you have this missionary gene, I guess, from your family.
I don't know, but I like this kind of activity.
What about Russia? Would it be possible today to do mission work?
Actually, I'm not aware about Russia. I know that we have issued a law a few years ago, and it's forbidden to have a missionary activity in the street, in public places, just inside the church. I mean, we have to consult with people who are living there, and how do they see how it's better to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe somehow not so openly in the streets. In another way, it's possible, but I don't know at the moment.
Yeah, because we had heard in the news this situation with the Jehovah's Witnesses Church. They've been basically taken down in Russia for some reason, which they were in the news, but that kind of situation hasn't transferred to Lithuania.
No, Lithuania is still the member of the European Union, and the same as other Western countries.
Yeah.
There's still freedom of consciousness and freedom of faith, and you can spread the Bible, the books, pamphlets on the street and talk to people. Yeah.
So will you continue doing this kind of mission?
Yes, we do. We plan to go to Lithuania and to visit the main cities, Vilnius, Kaunas, and Klaipėda, together with other people from Ukraine and Denmark, and we hope and we ask the God's blessings for that, God's guidance.
I see you have another book with you.
This is the book. It's called True Witness. It's written by one British author. Her name is Margarita Nikolajevaite. She's Latvian, but she was born in Latvia. And she was writing different books about the Orthodox Church, Catholic Church in Soviet Union, as well about Adventists. And she has written a book about the underground church in the Soviet Union. As you know, there were existing official Seventh-day Adventist churches, but they had to report everything to the intelligence service, to the KGB, and they were controlling what we are saying and spreading what kind of message. So some people just understood that they don't have enough opportunities to spread the word. We decided to go underground, and some of them we just separated, and we were gathering in the flats, in the houses, some in the basements, and they were sharing the gospel. And at the time, of course, it was also quite dangerous to do that, but usually people were speaking, finding a friend and then trying to speak about the God, not so publicly standing on the square and saying, if you would like to get a book.
So everything was actually undercover, as you said, and it was done in secret.
In secret. And one of the leaders, his name was Shelkov, he spent about 20 years in prisons in total. He lived more than 80 years. So in total, at first, as I know, he about 10 years, afterwards also 10 years, and different labor camps as well. But I read his also testimonies, also in this book, that he also thinks that it was God's blessings and guidance, because he was also spreading the word, God's word, to prisoners.
To prisoners and the labor camps.
In the labor campers, yeah.
He was a Seventh-day Adventist?
Seventh-day Adventist, yeah. But at first he was, as I know, he was Baptist, and just afterwards he found this religion.
Wow, this is amazing. I don't know how many people would actually decide to go for prison for so many years. And this is a huge part of your life, to take 20 years out of your life for God's sake.
And these people, I think mainly the leaders of these underground churches, they were always, I mean, the KGB was always observing them, they were persecuted, but somehow, for example, some of them, they managed to live 50 years in freedom. It's of course called freedom. You have to hide yourself constantly from the governments. And officially, we were called the enemies of the government, of the state.
Yeah. And this is very interesting that you mentioned that, because there is actually one phrase in that very same book, which you have there in Russian. What is the name in Russian? Of the
this one?
No, the other one?
This is the Bible.
Yeah, the
this
other one. Yeah.
Great controversy.
Yeah. How do you say it in Russian? In Russian?
Великий конфликт.
All right. Okay. So conflict. That's actually an international of international word. But in that very same book, there is a phrase that at the end of time, there will be a group of people again which is going to be called and punished as the enemy of the state. And I'm sure that you know that phrase. It's written in that book. How do you find it? Don't you think that's a very interesting, kind of a prophecy? That's a prophecy that what you have experienced, your parents, your granddad had experienced, it's going to happen again?
Yes, I think it's most important to have a faith. And as I remember at the end of the Old Testament, it's written maybe not everybody from the wise people will suffer and will be tortured, but the wisest one. So imagine, but I think it's most important to have a faith, and for the sake of what you're doing this.
Yeah.
For your glory or someone's glory or getting more wealth. But understand, if I would be doing for the God's glory, I would go for that.
Yeah. It's very interesting, and I'm sure you could go on with a couple of hours with your experience and your background. But just to summarize again, because I'd like to point again back to that same very book, which I know that you're also spreading around, because you also define it life-giving. There is very important truth, not just interesting history in there. But to summarize again, going back to the Soviet Union and going back to the ideology, which is actually being exposed in that book. That ideology, this is actually what the subject of that book. It's about the conflict between good and evil. And if you look back at the communist ideology, would let people decide, because that's not very difficult to decide. If you have an ideology which is suppressing people, which is taking your freedom of speech, freedom of religion, what kind of ideology, where does this ideology come from? This is actually what this book is about, isn't it? And I suppose that's why you're also spreading this book for people, to know what happened and what really this is about.
I think when I start speaking to people about this book, I'm saying them, this is a book about history of the faith of religion and of the prominent people, how we were fighting one against the states. And they were very bold to do that. And they were very exceptional people who have suffered, but they also dared enough to to spread the message about the gospel, about the God, and what the church was doing, the Catholic Church was doing, and how the church was contradicting the Bible. And I think mainly through this way I try to attract people in spreading a message about this book and offering them to read it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Margarita, for coming here to Denmark and being part of this interview. And hopefully we'll see you again. Otherwise, God be with you.
Thank you. But maybe you get less, 15 if you cut. It's yours and this is yours.